To make our caramel glazed banana cream cheese pound cake, we're going to add 3 1/4 cups of cake flour. Now, if you would prefer to sift your cake flour, you can. I didn't bother sifting it. The cake flour I'm using is pre-sifted, so I'm just going to measure it out and add it to my mixing bowl. Now to that, we're going to add a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And to that, we're going to add 1 teaspoon of baking powder. And so once you get these dry ingredients in your bowl, go ahead and give them a nice stir. You want to make sure that there's no pockets of salt or pockets of baking powder hiding anywhere. You want to make sure everything is thoroughly combined. Now to this, we're going to add our sugar. And our sugar is going to be 2 1/4 cups of granulated sugar. Right to the flour in the bowl. 2 1/4 cups of granulated sugar. And then next to that, we're going to add our butter. Now I'm baking with salted butter, but if you want unsalted, you can. So we're going to use 3 sticks of softened butter, whichever kind is your preference. And then to the softened butter, we want to add 1 package of softened cream cheese. That's 1 8-ounce package of softened cream cheese to the butter. And this is in the same mixing bowl with your dry ingredients and your sugar. Now in this cup, I have 1 cup of mashed bananas, and to that I'm adding just a capful of butter pecan elixir. That's optional. I wanted to add a teaspoon of banana extract, but I only had a couple drops left. So then I ended up putting like a good teaspoon of vanilla in it too, because I didn't have enough banana. But we're gonna dump our mashed bananas right there in the bowl with everything else. And now I have 6 room temperature eggs. I'm gonna start my mixer. I'm just gonna dump all my eggs right on in. Now, when you start mixing your batter, you wanna go ahead and set the timer for 3 minutes once you get all of the ingredients in the bowl. Now, we also wanna add to this 2 additional egg yolks, just the yolks, for some added richness, okay? And so once we get all of the ingredients in the bowl, then we're going to set our timer for 3 minutes. And we want to mix this batter for 3 minutes on a medium speed. And halfway through, you want to just give your bowl a good scrape down. Make sure you scrape the sides. Make sure you scrape the bottom and the paddle or whisk attachment, whichever one you prefer to use. And then continue to mix on a medium speed for the remainder of the 3 minutes. Then we're going to add our batter to our prepared bundt pan. My bundt pan has just been sprayed with regular baking spray. And I want to give my batter a nice hand mix just to make sure that there's no clumps of flour anywhere. And then we're going to add all of this batter to our bundt pan. We're going to bake this in a cold oven at 300 degrees. And it should bake for about an hour to 20 minutes or an hour to 30 minutes, depending on your oven. Mine's ended up baking for about an hour and 25 minutes in full. I think I started checking it at the hour and 15 mark, and then I gave it like another 10 minutes. So, and I also bake it on a baking sheet. So here is the final result. I will say that when I went to flip this cake out of the pan, and I did let it cool. I let it cool for about 10 minutes in this pan. I wonder if that was too long because it gave me a bit of a fit. A little bit of it did stick to the pan. It was not a good full release, but I was able to make it work anyway, despite, you know, that it stuck a little. And you'll see it. So I had to actually wiggle it off of there. And as you can see, a little bit of it did stick to the inside of the pan. But, I mean, the cake is still fully intact. And we're gonna go ahead and set this to the side. We wanna make our caramel glaze for this cake. You want a nice heavy bottom saucepan to make this glaze. And the ingredients are gonna be 1 cup of sugar, 6 tablespoons of butter, and a 1/4 cup of heavy cream. And to the heavy cream, you can add like a capful of vanilla extract if you desire. So I started off with my pot on medium heat, and I added this 1 cup of sugar just a little at a time. I think maybe about 1/3 of a cup at a time. And it goes through different stages, and you gotta just trust the process. And you see right here how the sugar has clumped up, almost candied a bit, but we still got our heat on medium, and it's gonna melt. You just gotta keep stirring it and just trust the process. And as you can see, it's melting. It's taking its time. This is a slow process. You don't want to rush it. But once you get it to about this color here, you actually want to turn the heat off, because you don't want it to get any darker than this, else it's going to burn. But it's okay, because the heat from the eye, even though it's off, it'll still continue to melt that sugar and get it smooth like you need it. And I'm just stirring, trying to get all the lumps of sugar out and make sure it's completely and fully dissolved before I get ready to add my butter. So like I said, it's 6 tablespoons of butter. I think I added it 2 tablespoons at a time. And I did use soft butter because I didn't want cold butter to hit this hot caramel. So it's softened butter. 2 tablespoons go in at a time, and I just stir to dissolve it. And keep in mind, the heat is off, but because the eye is still hot, we're still able to melt everything. But the point of having the heat off is so that the caramel doesn't burn and doesn't get any darker than this amber color. That's where we want to keep it. And so once we get all of our butter fully incorporated, again with the eye off, next we're going to add the last of the butter. And the next step after we get this butter melted in will be the heavy cream. And again, I want to also reiterate that I added my vanilla to the heavy cream, so that I'm adding that in one step, and I'm going to do that here. So there's my cream, and it's got a splash of vanilla in it, and I want to whisk that in. I probably should have had a bigger pot for this, but we're going to make this work anyway. Even though it's smoking, this eye is off. So once we get it all whisked and smooth, you want to take it out that pot and transfer it to a heat-proof container. It's thin, but when you let it sit, it will thicken up like this. As it cools, it'll thicker. The longer you let it sit, the thicker it'll get. And so it can become a glaze, or if you let it get cold, you can whip it and it can become a frosting. You can even spread it. It just depends on how long you let it sit. But you do want to make sure that your cake is fully cooled before you add this glaze. Otherwise, the cake will absorb it. And you can put as little or as much of this as you would like on the cake. And this is how the cake will look once you cut it. We'll cut a little slice out, and you can see it's very tender, very moist, nice and fluffy banana cake.